Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As David mentioned, we're going to talk through a bit about optimizing your app stack whilst keeping control of costs today. So we're going to talk through that exercise, different approaches, industry insights. Before we go into that, let's have a bit of an intro from each of us. So, Rory, if you don't mind, I'll kick off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over to you. Let's reference the fact that Alex unfortunately isn't with us. I think he's been delayed on some travel plans. He was looking forward to being here, but unfortunately wasn't able to make it. But David, thank you in his stead, doing a sterling job. So intro for myself then, Dan Daly. My background is one of an accountant in practice prior to joining Futrli, and that subsequently being followed as Futrli by Sage following our acquisition by Sage. So my role is as head of advice at Futrli. That is a role that essentially focuses in on the enablement of our product users in the configuration and optimization of the Futrli platform as part of those clients' advisory offerings and using the forecasting and reporting tools to their maximum capacity. So that's my role. We'll leave that there. I think that's probably enough, Rory, and I can hand over to you for a bit of an intro.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Rory. I've been working with AutoEntry for coming up to 7 years. That was my first kind of gateway into working in the accounting and bookkeeping industry. And similar to Dan and Futrli, I was part of AutoEntry, which then went through the acquisition with Sage as well. Fortunately with that, I've always remained within the accountants division to kind of helping accountants from a startup point of view all the way through to a well-established practice, kind of helping them get their clients on board with kind of using technology, even outside of AutoEntry, not just using data entry apps, but also kind of assisting with the advisory piece into different apps in the technology sector. And that was predominantly my background beforehand as well. And yeah, look forward to kind of having a bit more of a breakdown, and optimizing app stacks is kind of my passion here. So look forward to contributing today.
Perfect. Thanks, Rory. Let's get going and let's reference it. So we're going to start with a poll. We've got a couple of polls we're going to run today. And the reason I like to include those, and Rory, I'm sure, will be aligned with me on this, is that it's good to have an interactive webinar.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, Rory, we can pivot sufficiently enough on the way that we're covering the different subject matters based upon the responses we get. So if everybody could just respond to the poll. First one up is, an acknowledgement of the fact that app costs have increased recently, and it's about how much you're feeling the impact of that. So, is it moderately more than you like that? And, is it so significant that perhaps it's become a struggle? So I can see a lot of responses coming through. It looks like at the moment we've got a fairly heavy weighting.
Oh yeah.
Than I would like. I don't know. That's a surprise. Is it, Rory?
I'll be honest, it's quite interesting to see, because I'm watching it live and I'm watching it jig around. And I did kind of preempt that number 2 would be the favourite, because of course in the last 2 months we've seen some major players in the accounting industry, in the app sector, make significant changes. So yeah, so it's definitely interesting to see where it will all align.
I think it looks like we've probably got the most responses. It has come out. Let's reference the numbers so everybody knows. So we got for those that have responded, which is everybody. We've got 100% response rate. So thank you. So we've got 19% for review, moderate amount. We've got 67% more than I would like, and then 14% it's going to struggle. So clearly it's a thing. I'm glad it's a thing, because it gives it credence to the subject matter that we're going to talk through. Let's, I guess, use that as a segue into just talking to our agenda for today. And that is, as you'll see on screen, we're going to talk through determining an app's value, making decisions based upon that value, implementing cost control processes moving forwards, and then we're going to talk to a bit of self-assessment, applying what you've learned when you need it the most. So bringing a bit of structure to the way in which you approach your decision-making process for the apps that you adopt, how you're going to use them, what value they're bringing, and ensuring you've got methods for cost control in that. And I think from just a reference this, from my experience, certainly when I was in practice, and the team that I led was heavily involved in adopting apps. And the truth is, we didn't really have a strategy. It was, what were you hearing most about in the market that everybody appeared to be using and felt like therefore we should be as well? Is that, Rory, does that sort of marry up with what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when I go to a lot of events and I meet a lot of accountants face to face, because obviously I'm there fronting AutoEntry. So I think a lot of people are going to expect me to just go down, let's talk about data entry route. But that's not the case, because it's about reviewing what's kind of there and understanding what the client needs here and now, because not every client's going to need the same apps for every practice.
Yeah, it's so true. And that point you make, Rory, that's gonna kick us off, really. It's the approach and understanding, you know, the needs. What's the positioning? What's the reason for needing these apps, and how are we going to use them? And so that sort of step back, have a review. That's gonna be where we kick things off. We're going to work through some content. We'll move through pretty quickly on content. We've got a couple of product demos, surface level. We're not going to go really deep, but we're just going to show a bit of products at the end, just to give you a heads up that will be there. But first of all, we're going to work through this content that we've talked to. So first off, app cost benefit analysis. Rory, you've mentioned it. Stop, review, don't react. Think this is a big part of our whole approach at Sage that we're wanting to take. It's not about shoehorning product, it's about understanding needs and value proposition. And there's, if we, Rory, just reference these points we've got here, and then let's maybe talk to them, a few of them in a bit more detail.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, of course, right there, review, don't react is a massive thing, because again, you kind of mentioned it down there when you were in practice, how just because you see like a lot of noise about one particular software, you think it's what's going to be right for your practice, and it doesn't necessarily work out that way. And I've seen it firsthand as well, where people have come into AutoEntry, for example, and they've invested their money into it and their time, but then they haven't got it up and running because they haven't maybe onboarded clients into it, things like that. So with that, so there's the review there that you can do with either myself or within the team. And that's the same for a lot of these app providers out there, not just Futrli, not just AutoEntry, but everything. So the support and training is a massive piece to any kind of software that you might incorporate into your practice, because it is about understanding what the client needs and understanding what your vision and goals are for your clients, whether that involves their kind of company growth, which then of course will need to grow with you. So where it references there on the slide, features that grow with you, that is exactly the case, because you will start off using the software maybe with 1 or 2 clients, and then you slowly onboard it, unravel it out to as you are introducing more clients into your practice. And it's just about handling that workflow, so you're not sprinting and then having to come to a halt, doing another review 6 months later and jumping forward. So that's kind of a really key aspect as well, understanding what the future looks like for yourselves. And then with that, of course, is where it mentions their partner program for revenue. This is a massive one I see. It's really kind of kicked off for AutoEntry, so I can reference that. But I've also seen Sage do it. I've seen Xero do it, of course. And how about they get their clients directly to interact with the software, and it also helps offset cost for you as an accountant practice, because you're doing a referral link essentially, and then you can also kind of offset costs further down the line, whether it be further discounts for your products or apps that you're using, or kind of free use of an accounting software of some form. And then the other part there, integrations for clients and their software is a key one, because you've got to find a tool as well that's going to be agnostic, because you might see a client turn up. I mean, you'll be able to reference this more, Dan, when you're onboarding clients. How many of them came to you with Free Agent and Xero and QuickBooks and all the others?
Yeah, you've got to, it's definitely about having an understanding of the opportunity within your client portfolio. Each of your clients are going to have different profiles of their own tech stacks, and it's about how that's going to behave and play with the apps that you decide to adopt. So it feels like, Rory, what we're talking to here is that there's many conversations and considerations to be had beyond just whether or not you have a requirement for the functionality that the app brings. And it's each of these points here that you shouldn't be afraid to have these discussion points with the app providers. And, you know, like you said, Rory, you would have these conversations with accounting practices, and you would ensure that you covered and considered these points as part of the selection process.
Yeah, because you have to, because as you say there at the bottom point, what do clients want to use? Again, it's about kind of building that relationship from your practice directly into the client, because naturally people are always going to have those clients who will stick around with them, and it makes your life easier to have those tough conversations if you need to increase your fees and things like that, because they know you're doing right by them. And you can add in a whole new range of services later down the line, if you from bookkeeping to advisory, for example.
Yeah, on the client piece, it's, you know, we could go down a rabbit hole talking about,
absolutely,
you know, the importance of the quality of the data and the role that the clients play in that. But what we shouldn't do is not acknowledge the fact that ensuring the clients are comfortable with the apps that they may need to interact with in order to allow for that robust, accurate, reliable data flow is absolutely critical to the optimum, you know, delivery of the output of your service that relies upon that data being good. So hugely important. Yeah,
I totally agree.
Let's move on to the next one, Rory. We'll keep flowing through. I guess we will, you know, some of the stuff will, you know, we won't duplicate conversation points. So if we've covered some of the bits that we have on the slides, you know, we won't go over them again, but we'll keep moving through at a good pace to make sure we get to where we need to be. And what we're talking about now is, you know, perhaps the idea of actually carrying out an exercise to understand the costs and the benefits of the apps that you might employ. Measuring a return on investment. This is something that we did start to do when I was in practice, Rory. We did start to analyse certainly what the costs were likely to be with greater adoption and with more volume. You know, when it's coming to things like, you know, let's reference AutoEntry, we're talking about processing, credit-based system. You know, the more you're using, the more it's going to cost, but you're not costing you if you're not using it. And so we would weigh up those type of things. Do you AutoEntry, is that something that typically your clients are doing, do you think, or is it something they should do more of?
It's 50-50, because in the last few years, software's kind of adapting and growing. Like, technology's obviously been improving in things like accuracy and speed and turnaround times. So I think there's a case of you do want to measure that, because the simple thing with the data entry aspect is it's looking first off, how long is it going to take you to type up this bank statement? How long is it going to take you to wade through all these different receipts and invoices that have just been shoeboxed to you? I don't think a lot of people do that, and it's fair to do that. That's fine, because you never would have thought to sit down and track it. But now more and more people are able to see, for example, in an activity folder, like a time audit trail, to actually access that data and measure it nowadays. But I still find it's okay not to be doing that right now. It's something to definitely to be considering as technology moves on.
Got you. I feel like the thing that's jumping out at me on this page is the question about, does it increase capacity? Is it like having an additional employee? And the reason why it's jumping out is because I'm hearing this a lot from our audience. I'm reading it all over LinkedIn, even today, about the challenges that practices are facing in recruitment and retention of people. And so it feels like we're in a world where, you know, expanding our resources that we're utilizing in order to deliver upon our outputs is massive. So being able to evaluate that feels important. Rory, agreed?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, since I kind of entered this industry, it's always kind of been that case. And it's on LinkedIn, I do see a lot, but it is true, that really cheesy kind of saying about software doesn't ever call in sick or doesn't ask for annual leave and things like that. And I know it's really cheesy to say that point, but that is kind of the case. I mean, we can go again another rabbit hole referencing kind of the different books that are out there these days and using AI. It's not so much about the robots are taking over. It's just about adding on that services to support you, because we're always going to need in this industry a human touch and human interaction. So that's the other thing. So software allows you to increase that capacity without replacing that relationship.
Yeah. I think for me on that, that front. It's all about remaining in control of how you're using technology as a resource, not being blindly led by the noise that's being made in the industry. But what we're talking through is adopting an approach that is suitable for you and enhances your business operation. And so just ensuring that you're always in control of those decisions that you're making. Use the resource of technology to the extent that it's a value to the business. Okay, so let's go into talk a bit about Excel. So I'll make a declaration right off the bat here. I absolutely love Excel. So you're not going to hear me say anything bad about it. But I think what we need to do, Rory, is we just need to talk to some of the limitations or challenges that exist with Excel being used in certain functions.
Yeah, cool. Because I still deal with a lot of clients who are still on spreadsheets, and that works perfectly for them, especially for your kind of smaller clients, or maybe they're just not kind of up to scratch these days. Who knows? I personally am not the biggest fan of them. For the first kind of highlight there, I know it's kind of boring, the kind of GDPR topic, but that security piece is massive, especially where data goes online into a cloud these days. So it's just important that we are kind of covering ourselves and having, for HMRC compliance reasons as well, we want to protect our businesses and our clients, so we're not all getting the fines and the penalties. So yeah, the security in GDPR straight off the bat is massive.
Yeah, big part of it. Certainly something that we addressed when I was in practice. The challenges around ensuring that you remain compliant with, series of, multiple volumes of spreadsheets and data within those spreadsheets. I think it's, we've got the point here about they often break or corrupt when they get big. There's no doubt that Excel spreadsheets, when used for complex exercises, housing lots of data, can become a bit of a beast. And that, that isn't any easy thing, but we see a lot of it. I think we've still got to acknowledge that Excel is used quite widely.
And I don't think it'll go anywhere in the short term by any means whatsoever.
Yeah, it's here to stay. I think we just want to say, look, there are limitations. It's not that it needs to be dropped, but it needs to be considered where there might be better options that are available. And that doesn't need to be necessarily like a plaster pull. You can start to dip your toe in the water in using solutions that are available to start to replace some of those exercises, data tasks that are being carried out using Excel. So let's go on to cost control questions. Switching's a big thing. So, let's talk about it. There's recently been, it's where we kicked off the webinar. There's been some fairly significant price increases announced in the market. I think you'll be better placed than I to talk to some of these points, given your proximity to them.
I mean, yeah, it's the last couple of months have been a bit crazy. I'm not going to name any names, but of course, there's been inflation on everything across the board around the world, so it's kind of expected. But different scales and kind of the immediate uplift without the kind of not giving people the chance to review properly, I think that's where the uproar has kind of been. So these things unfortunately are going to happen. It's everything out of control. So it is about kind of ensuring that you are scaling correctly, because if you kind of onboard, for example, you've got 10 clients, but your vision is you want to onboard 10 more clients by the end of the year. You just want to be kind of comfortable knowing with that growth that your goal is as a practice can also be achieved with that software, because otherwise you might limit your business, and that might put a dampening effect from an emotional point of view, stepping outside of business. So I think it is important to understand what flexibility you have to achieve your values and your goals as a personal business owner as well. So with the changing over, it might sound like a really tough scenario to be in, because of course, if you're like, let's say you're switching contract or car insurance, it's quite, you can do it over one call or just do everything online. That's pretty much the same if you're moving over from one tool to the other. I think people would be surprised how easy it is to do, but just know there's always that kind of helping hand, because it is tough to just go, right, I've got to get it done now. And if you've got 100 clients, you've got to move over. Appreciate you might find it time consuming, but that time can be given to you from like a software provider. Again, not just AutoEntry and Futrli, but you'll be surprised how accommodating everyone can be, and not just for the sake of getting the money in the bank, because it's not the case. It is about making sure it's right for you and making sure we're doing it correctly, so there's no kind of bad relationship to start off with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is, so we're going to talk on the next slide a bit more about the switching piece, but what I wanted us to sort of talk to here was, well, firstly, I want to talk about the transparency piece. I think for me in practice, this was the biggest sort of bugbear. It was price increases alone, I don't think troubled me. There's an expectation that prices will increase. It's like any other good or service that you might buy within a typical economy. SaaS business models, especially, and accountants that have worked with SaaS business models will know that they work on a model of getting volume and then increasing prices, increasing functionality to marry up the value proposition. So that wasn't unexpected. What was unexpected was where there was no transparency of the fact that prices might increase. And I think it's all about, and this is where, Rory, the approach that you adopt in your relationship with your clients, I think it is what I would have wanted. It's look, where are you at? What is the value in either migrating, adopting a new app, or actually are there other solutions that, might mean that sticking where you are is a good option, and having that degree of transparency in that conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
Rory, should we talk specifically to a bit about this one? Because this is really the big bit in my mind. If I'm with an app, and especially one that has, such a depth of influence on the operations that I carry out as a business, let's talk to AutoEntry. It's something that potentially is used in the delivery of services and, supporting of clients' processing work that is going to have an impact across a wide range of the portfolio. And so my immediate thought is, prices have gone up with the solution that I'm using, and I'm thinking about using something else, but it's a big exercise in my mind. What does it actually look like?
No, it's a great kind of topic, because again, I'll probably kind of reference a lot that we're reading on the screen now. What that process generally looks like is just kind of, the first part is just dedicate 15-20 minutes tops, really, just to have that initial conversation piece, because you don't need to kind of spend the first 2 hours, because it get very overwhelming. Just have that kind of 15 minutes to understand. So from my point of view, and I think this is just kind of an industry standard these days, fortunately, it's just to understand, how does your practice currently operate, understanding, so what works really well for you, what are your clients loving about using that tool. And then by having that kind of discovery, kind of getting to know each other and the businesses and aligning, and everyone can answer the questions, because it's about your practice and how you're using it. So it's not something you have to prepare for mentally. You'll generally already know it all. So just having that initial call can then lead on to kind of greater kind of communications and breaking down that journey to a much easier level, whether that be kind of jumping into a product demonstration, trialing it out, and then kind of onboarding it to clients for a trial test phase. So there's different ways to look at it, but it's just that first 15-minute window, I think, is really valuable, just to understand how you currently operate, what works well for you, and maybe what doesn't work so well. And then we can set out a goal and what it will look like. And that in turn will create the kind of time window, answer a lot of these questions we can see on this screen in terms of importation, migrations, and things like that, as well as the kind of the demos and the timings thing as well. So it's all kind of done in your own time. There's not a deadline you have to enter a software by. So it's not all done by like financial year ends, things like that. It doesn't need to be. So yeah, it's just about choosing what's best for you. But of course, the app providers will be able to assist with that.
Yeah, I think that's it. probably two things then I would reference on here. And these weren't things that I could say I lived personally when I was in practice, but if I were to be now, I would. And that would be asking questions. So it's on it, we've got to ask the difficult questions. Don't avoid any questions that you think are relevant to your ongoing usage of an app as a practice. And I think then it's probably, in a world where we can expect that prices are going to increase over time, and on the basis that you've carried out a costing exercise that ensures that as a model you can adopt that cost of part of your operation, then it comes down to the ongoing support of that app that is likely to be one of the biggest weighted factors in your consideration. And I mean, Rory, just for you to talk a bit to the AutoEntry support, I mean, presumably that's a huge part of the value that it brings.
Yeah, it has to be, right, because as I said, right at the start, it's kind of working in tech and things like that. It's always been kind of what I've been doing over the last 10 years. So with that, you've got to be honest to say it is software at the end of the day. Software is not always going to be kind of ticking along, or there might just be, there's so many different areas to click into. So being able to access support in different ways is so valuable. And I've seen it in the worst scenarios and the best scenarios with us. Not gonna lie and say it's always been perfect. So yeah, kind of always having that instant live chat, because it's okay if you're someone who doesn't want to pick up the phone. I think COVID has taught a lot of people we can build an online relationship. So some people want to kind of stick to that, and that's okay. Like, don't feel like you have to do it over the phone all the time. But that is also an accessible tool. Make sure there's kind of a dedicated support line, whether that be on the chat and a phone number. But also, it's also really valuable to have a point of contact. I know it might be annoying because that person could go on annual leave. However, it's just always nice to kind of have that ongoing kind of relationship, so you're not having to repeat yourself as well. Yeah. Because I see it a lot, and I've been a victim of it. When I've been on a live chat, I've had this query, then I've ended up dropping in my internet connection. 20 minutes is lost, so I've got to go back and redo it all. But if I had a dedicated point of contact, we can just pick up where I left off. So that's really key as well, making sure you have someone who's accountable and you've got the access to them.
Yeah, agree with that. Couldn't agree more, in fact. Okay, Rory, should we talk about a bit of cost control, client pricing? I wonder if I can start by...
Yeah, please do. This is definitely your remit, Dan. I'll let you take control of this one.
I want to start by trying to describe to everybody how much of a pain this was when I was in practice, and the challenge of which approach we adopted. And it almost always came down to what is going to give us the biggest admin headache in managing this. So it was an absolute nightmare. It caused me hours of pain trying to make a decision on this. But let's talk through what the most sort of common choices on this are. At its very basic level, what we're talking about here is that you might be a practice that is adopting an app. There are costs that come with that, and it's about whether or not where the clients, the costs relate to the delivery of a client service or the client is directly using it. It's what you're doing about recharging, dispersing, or even passing over the burden of those costs directly to clients. So if we were to split that into three, we're talking about, do you absorb the app price rises as an operational cost? Are the apps part of your toolkit that allow you to deliver your service to the clients, and therefore do you take that approach of absorbing the cost? Do you itemize costs so that you can be recharging them and you can be transparent? Now, this is one whereby the idea of that fills me with a headache about what that might look like in terms of an admin exercise and being able to do that. And I think what I wish I had done more was ask the vendors to be able to provide the sufficient level of detail on their billing that allowed me to have those options in what I did with the charges, my end. We've got clients bring their own software. So you recommend apps, you talk about how they're adopted, but they pay them directly. You could argue there's a loss of control there. So that could be a downside of it. And then we've got the idea that there's a mixture of the above. And in truth, I think that's what I had. And I don't know that. I think this is very dependent upon the specific sort of operational unique factors of each of the practices as to which is best for them. But I acknowledge this, you know, it can be a bit of a headache. I think if you were to pin me down now, Rory, and ask me which way I would go, I feel like I would want to go down the route of trying to absorb these app costs and consider them as part of my practice toolkit in delivering the services that I delivered to my clients. Now that's pretty broad brush in its sort of statement, but I feel like that's the but what do you think, Rory?
Well, yeah, do you know what, that kind of the absorbing the cost and things like that is definitely becoming more and more frequent, especially when you've got different tools out there like Go Proposal, for example, allows you to kind of instantly charge back things like that. But the idea of that is absorbing it just allows you to again keep control, and kind of you don't have to then, if as you say there, bring your own software. If you're then having to try and learn what that software is, you might be stuck for time. You might be a bit behind where the client wants you to be. So by kind of being in control of it, you can cherry pick how your practice operates and which clients are beneficial here. So again, you know kind of where your pricing's at. So yeah, it's a totally valuable piece. And I think the thought of me pinning you down might just be the best part of the webinar for me.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I meant metaphorical, but you know, you've brought it to life. And what I guess we should just recognise, because it was a thing for me in practice, and it was partly why we chose AutoEntry as our vendor of choice in that space. And it was the credit system that AutoEntry apply. And it was, you know, as a pay as you go, really, you know, you pay for what you ate type thing. We liked that because it meant, you know, you weren't buying bundles and having less of a handle on exactly what was being processed, what was being costed. Do you think that plays a part in this conversation?
It does. And you know, I'm fortunate again to see where I've been here for a while. I've seen us test out the other side. I've seen us actually try and think, right, hold on a minute. Some people might prefer this kind of have this, here's a fixed fee cost. But what we actually generally found out is we would kind of, people weren't using up what they were paying for. So, and again, you'll have clients in different deadlines or seasonal businesses. So let's say you've got someone who sells a lot of stuff on eBay before Christmas. Naturally, they're going to give you a lot more invoices in December time and January. I mean, we won't get in the topic of January just yet, because I know that appears a bit later, but it does kind of allow you to control how often your business is going to use it. As I say, seasonal businesses come into play, how often you see a client, whether you see them monthly, quarterly, or even just that annual drop off. So it allows you to have that control there and then as well.
Yeah, agreed on that. And you're right, we will address the January conundrum later on. We're going to move into just to get a bit of a gauge on the audience. You know, we've talked about our opinions on this, but the truth is, you know, there's a lot of factors that likely drive where you're going to be with this. So everyone should have a poll on their screen. Really good if you could just all respond and just let us know your thoughts on, you know, the model that you would most likely adopt. I would imagine there'll be a bit of a spread here.
I think so. I'll be honest, and I'm actually seeing it live, and I didn't think number 3 would actually be in favor, and that's kind of reflected on what I'm seeing live with the results as well.
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty level pegging between 1 and 2, isn't it? As they
Well,
you're right, there's not much on 3.
I think with 3, you kind of really hit the nail on the head when you would talk about you in practice and how you would want to adopt this, and how you said there and then you want it to be absorbed by your own practice. And I think, of course, you're speaking from experience of doing what everyone else is doing. So I think, that's kind of generally what made me think that's why I wouldn't go that way.
Yeah, so we've control. Do you know what? I've just in the last response come in, and that last response clocked in and meant that between 1 and 2, there's a completely even split.
It was.
So I think that probably, well, I reckon that would be a fair reflection of the industry.
Yeah, and do you know what? It goes right the way back to number 2. You can reference that to the partner program piece we spoke about right at the start, and then number 1 is just about you controlling what there is. So yeah, they both make perfect sense as to why they should be level pegged.
Yeah, and I think it's another case of making sure you're doing what fits your practice right, and that theme carries through. This is an element of the process of adopting and utilizing apps. But the whole way through, what we're trying to promote here is that you as a practice are in control as to what fits you best and your client base best, which forms part, of your operation. So that is what it's all about, and that needs to carry through in every sort of interaction that you're having. Okay, right, Rory, should we move on to the learnings? So we talked about it, this recent bouts of price increases, they aren't the first price increases that have been felt in the market. So let's just have a think about, the idea that we've perhaps been caught out by some of the price increases, and ways that we might be able to learn from that and make sure that, not that we're not disappointed or frustrated by price rises that might come in the future, but that we know what our game plan is should they come about. And just to scan through and then bring you in, Rory, we've got the plan ahead. I mean, in life, I think I would give that as a mantra for everything: planning ahead as far as possible. Smart, flexible, adaptable. Flexible and adaptable, I mean, that is what you need to be, as agile as possible in the world. So seems to be sensible. And then, it's about where that can take you. We've got reference to automated forecasting. Perhaps, Rory, I'll talk to that a bit more in a second. But
yes,
in terms of the first 2 bits, planning ahead, remaining adaptable.
So, I mean, of course, we're not in control of what price increases we're going to see from different software vendors. I mean, typically, kind of what the norm is you can probably receive an email a couple months prior, just to and then be informed that way. And then kind of even we have the ability now. Every tech should have this ability to make sure everything's notified. But again, just bringing it all the way back to the human touch and actually having someone be accountable for. And by no means, I'm not saying I've ever done this perfectly, but this is just kind of how I envision, I predict the future to go from my personal point of view and how I interact with my clients, as well as in just any other kind of practice, is again just having that conversation piece. So from a software point of view, to not kind of annoy people, we should be informing everyone, but then we should also be giving everyone our access to be like, any queries about it, you can book in a time, or here's a forum where you can put any queries and we'll answer them. So that kind of allows you for us to engage. But from a practice perspective, you should always kind of, I mean, it's easier said than done, right? Should always kind of have these in the back of your mind when you start seeing things like petrol prices going up and telephone bills going up. It's usually going to be a knock-on effect across the world, right? So of course, there's where the planning ahead kind of comes in. I know that's very vague. When it comes to the flexible, adaptable side, it kind of, again, it just shows where technology is going. And even though we might feel like we're there, but we've only kind of recently seen a massive influx of how we can use AI in practice and other business aspects. That's only going to kind of keep rolling into other avenues. So software is going to add on new features. Software is going to see what's kind of coming in differently. So maybe part of that plan to justify the price increase, you can ask, what does that roadmap look like? What features am I going to be gaining? What also, where is this increase? Where's this additional money going to go into? Have that understanding. So you want to understand kind of where software can be flexible, because we're always able to add in new features where possible. And then again, as I said, I don't want to mention AI too much, but it's just what the noise I'm hearing on LinkedIn and every event I've been attending. So I think just gauge that understanding for the client to the software vendor as well.
Yeah, it's true. And it leads me into, Rory, what I feel is a shameless plug from me on advisory services and automated
forecast. I did want to just ignore that part, but yeah.
But shameless plug may it be, I'm going to continue nonetheless. I mean, my role is heavily focused on working with our accounting partners in adapting their working methods to be one of looking forwards with their clients. And whilst there's an obvious plug here to the Futrli platform, what we're talking about here is having foresight of businesses' directions of travel. And where software and apps start to play a big part in your business operations, being able to forecast out the likely financial impact of any price increases is massive. And I'm talking there to the impact on your practice. But in turn, this is an adoption of method of working with your clients as well in terms of looking forward. So I want to talk a bit about effective forecasting. And I want to start that off by talking about this 24/7 flow of data. Everything that we're doing now feels like it's all working towards the idea that we can achieve, and I'll use the term real-time information. It's been floating around for some time now. Whether it's truly been achieved, I don't know, but there's lots more solutions now available to you as accounting practices and to your clients in an effort to serve the idea of achieving real-time information. Now, that is great. The truth is, I think, getting there and being on the journey is probably the most important step. Trying to get that information as up-to-date as possible. It's certainly going to enhance the level of support that you can provide your clients should you be looking to achieve it. But it comes back to, and I'm going to talk to what I do, which is looking to shift that conversation between accountant and client from one that's talking about stuff that's already happened from one that talks about what's going to happen. And there's no certainty in that, but the more you can increase the accuracy, the timeliness, the reliability of that data flow between you and your client, the better positioned you'll be to have that conversation about what's coming down the line. We got on here the reference to cloud, apps, automation, open banking. These are all functions that are going to support that effort of achieving real-time information. Algorithmically generated via software, that word is tough to say, especially live. So forgive me if it wasn't perfect, but I do like it. Anywhere where we can use technology to give us a bit of a leg up. So Futrli, and we will jump into a bit of it'll be a surface level demo, but we'll talk to the automated forecasting outputs that can be generated in Futrli, and it's a leg up as a starting point for that conversation. Responsive and adaptive in a time that fits the way in which the world moves now. We're a click and buy mentality society. We want things to happen quickly. And if we, what we're talking about is looking forward as far as possible. And, you might not be able to eliminate surprises. There are factors that are beyond our control, but let's at least have a picture of where it looks like we're going. There can't be any harm in that. Okay, so just a bit conscious of timing. We got a last point, which I'm sure everyone is going to love to talk to, Rory, before we just go into a bit of AutoEntry. Tax season is coming, and the relevance here is that the role that data and the apps that you use in order to manage that data can and should play a huge part in the way that you manage that January conundrum. Best practice, let's not leave it till January as far as possible. Reality, there's nothing we can do about the client's willingness to engage with us in carrying out that exercise. But let's try and take advantage of solutions that are available. The idea of, and Rory, you mentioned it, and it feels, to mention the shoebox of receipts feels like we're talking about something that should be history, but there is a reality that it's not. It is still a thing, and it seems mad that we can't move away from it, but I think we've still got to make every effort we can to get into a position whereby we have the availability of that data to ease burdens like tax season and this constant January nightmare that arrives for everybody in this space.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the shoebox scenario. I mean, that's the premise of what this software was built on, AutoEntry as a whole. And as you say, you can't change people. Like that's not your fault that you're getting that. I mean, there are maybe you could do more to kind of not get that kind of dumped in on you. But I've seen it firsthand. Friends who are builders just shoving receipts in the glove box, shoving it in their pockets, and dropping it around their accountants. And when I see that firsthand, it makes me kind of wince, and that's kind of where the pain comes in. Um, I can give a very quick overview and show you what that will look like in AutoEntry in just a moment as well. So
I think that probably takes Rory on quite nicely into our first demo. And this is surface level. We're going to give a bit of intro.
yeah,
There will be an opportunity to request a demo, a more full demo at the end of this webinar. But let's just have a bit of a surface look at what some of the points that we've been highlighting and talking to as part of the subject. So, Rory, feel free to hijack my screen share.
yeah. I believe it's popped up saying the screen share is active. So, can we see that? Okay.
Could somebody?
Yeah, Dan, you might just need to turn your one off, Dan. I think yours is sitting in front of Rory's at the moment.
Okay, right.
There we go. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
So,
Good work.
it's Dan, you just kind of mentioned there, reference back to some of the points we discussed, because I am very conscious a lot of people might already be aware of what AutoEntry is or similar tools. So with AutoEntry, the idea is you can have whichever clients in here as you like, because what AutoEntry is allowing you to do is add in an unlimited amount of clients and companies into AutoEntry to help you eliminate the manual data entry. So the premise of the software is allowing you to upload clients' data, invoices, receipts, bank credit card statements, and that can be uploaded via a mobile phone app, which you can ideally get the clients to download. And with that, they can, when they're out and about, can take a photo of the invoice or the receipt, and then it's straight into their account for them. Whilst it's doing that, it's also allowing you to become compliant, because we're going to create that digital record. We've gone so far without mentioning MTD, so I won't kind of start going down that warpath now. But again, ready for that compliancy piece in a couple of years. So we've got the digital record of the phone records and allowing you to have real-time data. Invoices can also be emailed in, and we can, of course, drag and drop them in as well in bulk. So if you do have a shoebox, they can all be imported in one go, no problem. And then simply all you need to do is you can then come in and you can view the invoices like so. And the software.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Of course you can.
Sorry, I hope on behalf of the audience who may be thinking the same, but it feels like there's a link here between when we were talking about the method adopted for the adoption of apps, and we're talking about the billing thereon. That home screen that you were just on, having that visual within your practice access to something like AutoEntry. I mean, that's got to be a pretty valuable screen in just giving you a profile of where everything's at with your clients in app.
Yeah, because I mean, the numbers we see here are numbers relating to which documents we need to check for the clients. But I think another point to kind of touch base on is kind of going back to that. If you do onboard a new client and they're perhaps not on Xero, or if you plan on transitioning to another software, so moving them from, let's say, QuickBooks to Xero for the XU users, then that can be achieved in here as well, because it's very much agnostic. You can kind of adapt to how they're currently set up, but then any data, if you did have to transition and migrate to alternative softwares, can also be done here as well. So it allows you to kind of have that bit more flexibility, going back to that moving on and migrating to different providers as well. So that's within here. And then, yeah, as I was saying, you can also view the documents in real time as and when they come through. So that's kind of just this page here. And the power of this is where the time saving aspect comes in, because we're going to start teaching to remember nominal codes. We can match it up to purchase orders here. And then we can even start reconciling it to the bank down here under mark is paid. What this is then allowing us to do is teaching it rules as we go along. So if I just make a simple change, it will pop up and ask me if that needs to be remembered for next time. So then you're not having tedious kind of times of going, right, direct debits is never going to change. It's always going to be the same, right? You might as well tell the software that, because then it's one less pile for you to get through. and including the extraction of line items, things like that. The power of AutoEntry at the same time is allowing you to archive everything. So again, going back to that security and that client compliance piece, every client will also have access to an archive folder. And we actually kind of handle the compliance side because we store everything for a minimum of 7 years to follow HMRC guidelines. And then on top of that, you can give access to your clients to come in and download their data if you so wish. Alternatively, you can as well. So again, going back to that migration piece, everything can be exported out in one hit. Not only that, this is just a brief overview of the invoicing side. It can also reconcile to supplier statements to kind of save for that time, as well as kind of extract your PDF or paper copies of bank and credit card statements as well. So again, allowing you to export that into a CSV or Excel file to then import that directly into your production software, your accounting or bookkeeping software. So the time is the main pain we're trying to solve here, because when you all signed up to become an accountant, Dan especially, I assumed you didn't go, right, I'm going to study to become an accountant, I'm going to do my qualifications, I want to sit and type up for 10 hours of a week or however often I want to do it. It's probably not the front of your mind.
It certainly wasn't, no. And time is definitely precious.
Yeah.
I would imagine for all accountants. So any solution that's saving me time as an accountant, I'm on board with.
Because of course you can't control what you're kind of picking up with the clients a lot of the time. So if they do come with a backlog, this allows you to kind of get that kind of boring admin stuff out of the way, as important as it is though, and then you can put focus into other aspects of the business. The time saved is up to you. Do you want to onboard more clients? Do you want to train to do more services? Do you want to just work 3 days a week?
Yeah.
Like, it just, again, the idea of this is to just take back control of your practice and your time.
Yeah, so true. It's a nice,
as I say, very surface level.
Very surface level. We're going to, at the end of this, we will have a poll which will ask the question about demos. I'm just going to take back the screen share.
Please do.
Now, so I think
you're up and running.
I'm up and running. Okay. Again, surface level. What I'm going to talk to is the concept of Futrli as a platform. So this is all about using your source data, whether that be in Xero, QuickBooks Online, or Sage Business Cloud, the source data to which we have direct integrations. It's about creating a forecast for your clients that is a start point using the Futrli algorithm. So an auto prediction, which will start to generate a forecast for up to 36 months. It's just a start point. You can manipulate it, but it can serve as a catalyst for a forward-looking, proactive conversation with your clients. Now, I would definitely promote the idea, if the source data allows, that as accountants, you connect up your practice as an early step in the adoption of Futrli. Have a look at what it looks like with data that you're very familiar with, and as a practice owner, no better data than your practice's own. What I'll talk to is that on our dashboards here, which are automatically generated, the predictions run in the background after you've connected. It's surfacing metrics that are operational in their nature. So these are numbers that clients are likely to be very familiar with. We've moved a bit away from surfacing your typical, gross profit margins, net profit margins. We've got numbers. We've got reference to invoices and bills rather than, accounts receivable, accounts payable. Numbers that clients are familiar with that they'll want to have a conversation around. We've got different dashboards here across cash flow, profit and loss, balance sheet. I'll reference 2 of these tabs on the basis that we're just surface level here. But the idea is that in a forward-looking manner, you've got information that is useful for your client in order for them to be able to make decisions about their business. Things that they'll understand, details about their customer profiles, their supplier profiles, what money's coming in, where the money's coming in from, where it's going out. And on that note, I'll reference this customer and suppliers tab, because if I'd had this when I was in practice, I would have used it in every conversation I had with a client. Tells a great story based upon individual transactional detail in the source ledgers about the relationships with customers and suppliers of this particular business. So details about risk, dependency, activity on the account. And it gives you an idea on, you know, what contingencies might need to be built out should these relationships, you know, end or reduce. And you've just seen I've clicked on one here, which then starts to show some of these risk profiles, activities, and whether or not there's any dependency on this particular relationship. We've then got to run through these sections, and I'll just take 1.5 minutes more. We've got a forecasting section built up between 3 different types of data sets. Your daily tracker forecast is the one that has been automatically generated based upon a series of auto predictions. The daily tracker forecast looks at individual items on the accounts receivable, accounts payable ledgers, uses those to predict out cash flow influence moving forward for 36 months. It then applies and it rolls on a daily basis. It takes into account everything that's happened in the source data up to the end of yesterday. And what it does is on every single nominal line ledger, it applies an auto prediction based upon the history of that account. And if I just go into here, select any one of these numbers, it always provides you the basis of assumption for the amounts that it's predicted out. Now, these will cover both the performance impact, the accrual basis of the transaction, but also the cash flow impact. It also splits it between whether it's journals or transactions, bank payments, bank receipts. But of course, might not always be full merit in those. They can be turned off and replaced by your own predictions for building out forecasts, should you wish. The other 2 data sets that we have in here are scenarios and budgets, so you can build those out. They can be based upon your daily tracker. And you can just start to layer different data sets that build out some scenario planning options for you. We've got a reporting suite. As that's loading, I'll reference the drivers. So we have the ability to bring in operational metrics for surfacing of those details for our clients within reporting and dashboards. In a reporting section, we've got a series of templates that you can use as a start point. Let's just have a look at, for example, our annual health check template. These can always be updated with the parameters on the report builder on the right, but they give you a start point of this particular data set, you know, different types of graphics, tables, and you can just start to build out and get an idea of what it is you need to provide your client in terms of management information. So that is Futrli in what's smaller than a nutshell, Rory, because that's what it is.
I mean, it was good. I was impressed because I've heard people speak about Futrli before, and it's not something that you can really get covered in like 2 minutes because there's so many fantastic features in it, and the whole forecasting piece in the industry in general is a massive factor. So, yeah, props to you, Dan. I don't think I could have done that.
Well, thank you. I'm just looking at switching my screen share, so bear with me. I'm going to flick back to our presentation slides. Stand by. Okay, so we've got to pretty much the end of our time. We've just about run it on time, Rory, so we won't keep you longer. We got one last poll up here, which should appear on your screen shortly. And it's just about a personal demo. I would promote the idea of this. It's going to get you into much more specific details, you know, that's more relevant to you as an individual. So if you just knock some responses back in there, more than happy to organise that on the response of the.
Yeah, that's the other part. These kind of, it's all well and good. We can host as many webinars as possible, but having that one-to-one time is going to allow you to tailor everything. And then also do that kind of finding out if it's a good match for each other.
Yeah. And I think if we just reference back to the idea, you know, what the approach we're looking to take here is let's just take stock, review where everything's at and understand what the best fit is for that particular practice. So, you know, it's not a push on a product sell or positioning.
We're not going anywhere, right?
Exactly. And so I think that probably we're 1 minute past. I think the poll responses have come in. We got Q&A that we've allowed for here at the end, David, but I think let's just see if anything comes through, a couple of minutes. If not, you know, feel free to reach out to either Rory or myself and anything outside of this webinar, and we'll be happy to assist.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, guys. And we'll be sending out an email after anyway with things like the recording on, a bit of follow-up details. So once you get that, if you do get any questions, just feel free to reply to the email and we'll make sure it gets through to the right people as well. If you've got a specific question on there as well. I think you guys have done a good job because no one's got any questions today.
Incredible.
Oh, do you know what? I'll be honest. I was there thinking, hold on a minute. I said at the start I could see the Q&A as we go, and then as soon as we started, I was like, I can't see the Q&A. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
that's
no,
reassuring.
You've done a good job. So yeah, thanks guys, and thanks for filling the poll in, everybody as well. I think we'll probably call it a day there. And you, like I say, you'll get an email through following it up. Thanks for taking the time today. Thanks to Dan and Rory as well. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, David.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Nice one. Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
See you later.
Cheers.